Hey there, everyone. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and a happy new year to everybody. It's my first video of the new year, 2023. Here we go. So today we're still in part 2 of Liber ABA, the elemental weapons, elemental theories. And today we're going to be speaking about the robe, which is chapter 12. So I suggest reading that either before or after you watch this video. I think it'd be fine. It's not a long chapter, but yeah, robes are paramount to magic, so I'm going to start with my script. So yeah, I really love this topic. There are many types of robes through many different traditions, from the classic Tau Robe, worn by ceremonial magicians, to friar robes, to Buddhist or Brahma robes. And let me just pause my script there. One thing that I've incorporated in my personal black Tau robe is, in my personal work, I tie a friar's rope with 3 knots at my waist, and by tying it in a half knot around myself, I consider that 3.5 knots for the Kundalini spiral at the coil of the base of the spine. And for myself, I consider the 3 knots chastity, obedience, and poverty, which Crowley, I believe, writes about a little bit in one of his diaries, if not the Confessions. And if you don't know those concepts, you can look up chastity in Little Essays Towards Truth. It's not the Christian patriarchy view of chastity, abstinence of any type. It's being chaste to your work. So that's something that I've incorporated into my personal magical ritual. When I first began the Lemic magic with my teacher, I had yet to procure a proper Tau robe, and we needed to perform a 48-hour magical retreat. I remember asking him if I had one, which at the time I didn't. He asked if I had a bathrobe, and I did, a white one, which happened to be suitable because of its color, and it was brand new because I owned it for a long time but never wore it. He instructed me in performing a purification and consecration of it so that I could use it for the retreat. I later bought several, and I have hand-stitched several on my own for various orders over the years to come. But I just bring up that little short story to tell you, in times of need, when it comes to magical weapons, in a pinch, if you really need to do something, you can purify and consecrate almost any mundane thing for the task, as long as your mind is focused that once it's been cleansed and once it's been consecrated, this is no longer what it was. It is now a tool for magic. You can re-purify it after if you need it to be a mundane object again, but I would suggest at least doing a purification before using it for mundane purposes, or set it aside as a special item from now on if you don't mind doing so, if it's something that you could afford to get another one of. Then later on, when you have the time to either build one or carve one or make whatever weapon it is, or you have the funds to buy one, I suggest that you get something more proper, that's more official, suited to the task for whatever weapon you needed in a pinch. So, referring to robes, color matters greatly, as does whether or not it has a hood. They can correspond with a person's grade, if you're in a specific order. The color, like for instance, I'll show a picture later on of the AA robes, not images of them, but just phrases that describe the robes in brief. Mars, once you get to Gabora, the robe is red. Once you get to Chesed, 7 equals 4, I believe it's violet. So, for Jupiter and Mars. Besides for that, in AA, the robes are mostly white and black, with different insignia, but I'll get to that in a moment. I will endeavor to cover all of this and more in this video, as well as break down the chapter relating to the robe in Book 4. But first, to get this out of the way, if you look at the magical weapons under column 41 of Liber 777, under lines 2 and 3, Bina and Chakma, there is both the outer robe of concealment and the inner robe of glory. The outer robe of concealment can refer to a physical robe you wear, but it's referring also to the principle of form, that which conceals the light within. It can also refer to the outer body of light, or the aura, you might call it, the egg-shaped cocoon that we all have around us. The inner robe of glory is no such garb. It is the principle of will within the magician or of the universe. In 777 there appears this definition, quote, "The inner robe of glory symbolizes the true self of the magician, his unconscious, as the psychoanalysts call it. Their description, however, of its characteristic is totally incorrect." End quote. To say it is hadith would be much closer to the truth. About the Tau Robe, it is called a Tau Robe because of its shape. It is in the likeness of the Greek Tau, or the letter T, when a person stands with their arms up and out at shoulder height. Tau is the cross. It is light in extension, which must ultimately have some aim and inevitably manifest. The cross, then, is in the likeness of the human being, and therein lies its true holiness. For as Crowley wrote in Liber ABA, quote, "There is no God but man," end quote. We are the light manifest and made conscious, capable of deciphering and enacting our will, the will of God, the will of the universe, in all its many forms, toward the aim of union. Liber 777 gives the following definition of a Tau, quote, "Tau or cross symbolizes the element of earth as a solidification of the four elements. There is also the phallic meaning, whence Tau is attributed not only to earth, but to Saturn," end quote. If you notice the rosy cross, or any Tau cross, it can be folded up into the shape of the cube. You might have seen that image, or if you look at the rosy cross, it has different segments that are different colored, and so each one of those colored segments is one of the faces of the cube. Now, I bring up this quote from 777 to speak about the hood. The hood of a robe serves two functions for spiritual use. One, to conceal the face for privacy, so that in the days when the occult was absolutely illegal and forbidden, should a person unwittingly find a group practicing, or an untrustworthy person manage to gain entrance to the thresholds of the sanctuary for an initiation, by being hooded, members could conceal their identity until the person was proven trustworthy. Further, I suppose, for some people to be in a temple surrounded by an anonymous group of people in hoods might lend an air of mystery to the ordeal, or even spark a bit of fear in the candidate if they are squeamish. Secondly, the hood, which should be quite lengthy, can be pulled down to completely cover the face, and this allows the magician a place of absolute solitude to meditate, symbolically within the womb of the mother, where the temptation of opening the eyes is removed, for they have been blocked out, for the hood blocks out the mundane world completely by drawing the hood over your head. But in terms of the Tau having a phallic connection, mankind is the result of an fertilized egg. We each began as a single spermatozoon. That remains a part of who we are through all the growth of our lives. The phallus from which the seed comes has been synonymous with the sun. Every adept who has gained solar consciousness has on some level identified themselves with the phallus of Osiris or of God. To put it plainly, the hood is symbolic of the penis, which too has a hood that is drawn over the head. It's at least worth mentioning that in Atu 9, the Hermit, he is both robed and has a spermatozoan on the card. Also, I look at the hood as a cobra that has the hood that extends outward. There's a serpentine connection with the sperm and also the phallus, also the kundalini. Quickly before moving into chapter 12 by Crowley, this is an image from James Eshelman's The Magical and Mystical System of AA. Sorry it's a little blurry, but it's the best picture I have at the moment. So if you take a look at the robes, there are descriptions here. I'm not going to read them all, but 0 equals 0, which is probationer, has a white Tau robe, no hood, a gold braid along the bottom hem, cuffs, and neck. There's a pentagram on the front, it's usually red, and a hexagram on the back. And this hexagram is the hexagram of Earth on the back. It has the blue descending triangle and a red ascending triangle with a golden Tau in the center of it. I myself am a former member of the Outer College lineage of AA, under Gunther and their people. And the robes, in my opinion, are not only wrong, but just completely different for their group. For the probationer, they turn the golden Tau upside down on the back of the hexagram. I asked why when I received my iron-ons, and my instructor had no answer for me. I, at that point, had to try to justify it to myself, and determined that since the grade of probation is on the lowest rungs of the Tree of Life, being on the earth at the very least, the world of shells or Malkuth, perhaps the Tau is upside down, representing the glare of the sun hitting the earth. That was the best I could come up with. Honestly, I think it makes no sense. I think Gunther just wanted to differentiate their group, so he wrote Liber ABA, making up the whole thing and trying to insinuate that it's always been that way, trying to pawn off a Class B document as if Crowley wrote that. It's just sneaky, in my opinion, and I don't expect anything more from that group. I'm going to digress because I could keep going on that, but they've changed a lot of things, including their central holy book, if you could call it a holy book anymore. As you could see in the picture on screen, the robe of probation and Adeptus Minor is the same robe, save for private added insignia. The rest have hoods. The reason, I believe, is because the probation robe can be used for work in any grade of AA. It allows you the flexibility of seeing in all directions, whereas to have a hood, it is like a horse with blinders, restricted visibility. Strictly, work at hand is all you could see. Going with the connection of Tau as a phallic symbol, white is the color of the spermatozoon, and probation is a grade where you are not yet born into the order, so that the hood of the phallus has not yet formed. Now, why are black and white used for so many grades? Think about the colors, and I've spoken about this in my video about the symbolic nature of colors, if you want to check that video out. I think Crowley quotes this in his book Moonchild, as well as makes mention in his Confessions. White repels light, and is the absence of color. Everything is bounced off of it, and it retains little to nothing. For probation, this allows less energy and forces to come at the person aside for what is strictly necessary. Black, on the other hand, absorbs all. Black is the color of the Magister Templari, like Nui, for they, in Samadhi, are in union with all things that come into their proximity. They refuse no experience and embrace everything. They are one with the Tao, doing their will and nothing at the same time. Adeptus Minor also uses the white robe for the same reason, and that their sole goal is at that point singular, to attain knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel. Period. They do not want other experiences coming to them while performing that single piece of the great work. Finally, after they attain unto Gabora, the robe changes color, red for Mars and violet for Chesed, which is Jupiter. Then we get to the robe of the Magister Templari, which is outlined in Chapter 12. I've seen a few artistic interpretations, drawings, and digital renderings. Each embellished, as there is plenty of room to do so with Crowley's outline of it. I was gonna take the picture, or at least ask permission, but Frater Orpheus, on his Facebook page, has a very beautiful rendered digital version. If you go to Frater Orpheus, Robert Flores on Facebook, and you search robe on his post, you should be able to find it if you really want to find a picture of it. So I'm going to quote from Chapter 12 about this robe. Quote, "The general symbolism which we have adopted leads us, however, to prefer the description of a robe which few dare wear. This robe is of a rich silk of deep pure blue, the blue of the night sky. It is embroidered with golden stars and with roses and lilies. Around the hem, its tail is in his mouth, is the great serpent, while upon the front, from the neck to the hem, falls the arrow described in the vision of the fifth Aether. This robe is lined with purple silk, on which is embroidered a green serpent coiled from the neck to the hem." End quote. Note that no hood is mentioned for this robe, but just above this, Crowley wrote in this chapter, quote, "There are two principal robes, the white and the black. Of these, the black is more important than the white, for the white has no hood." End quote. This leads me to the conclusion that the MT robe can and should have a hood, especially as it should cover the whole of one's being, just as Nuit does. It's a dark robe, it's not white, so I think it should have the hood. The arrow that I quoted above is interesting, consisting, I believe, of a long shaft for the spinal column, or for Aaron's rod, with a pentagram as the barb, and plumes of truth as the featherings. There is a hidden serpent within the violet silk inside, which perfectly symbolizes Hadith, the inner robe of glory, and also the Kundalini, since it's going down the meridian of the body. It should indicate the Kundalini. About the principles behind the robe, Crowley writes, quote, "The robe is that which conceals, and which protects the magician from the elements. It is the silence and secrecy with which he works, the hiding of himself in the occult life of magic and meditation, and it is also the withdrawing of oneself from life as such." End quote. Lastly, the light above is permitted through the neck hole to descend all the way to the very wide opening at the bottom, thus, quote, "It permits that light to pass and illumine them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death." End quote. All else I could say about the Tau Robe is a quote by Donald Craig, quote, "To physically show both your conscious and your unconscious that you are no longer in your daily dress." End quote. When you do something repetitively in a certain place or in a specific outfit, as soon as you put on that outfit or go to that place, your mind adjusts, getting ready to perform the task at hand. So, using a Tau Robe for magic, you are setting yourself apart from things you normally wear and are immediately shifting to higher states of consciousness. This is why it is recommended not to do magic or meditate right where you sleep. 1. It can disturb your sleep pattern with energy and confuse the mind as to whether it should be awake or asleep. And 2. Reversely, if you sit down to meditate on your bed, you run the risk of going into a sleep state, thereby confusing the dream state with a vision. Briefly, on the orange robes worn by Buddhists, I found an article which I will quote from to give a few details of its symbolism. So it's about the Buddhist robes, quote, "The saffron robes monks wear dates back centuries. Orange was chosen mainly because of the dye available at the time, which was saffron. The robes themselves are meant to symbolize simplicity and detachment from materialism." End quote. And this is from another article, quote, Buddhist monks' robes originated in India. The first monks were encouraged to show humility by only sourcing pre-used materials for their robes. This would often result in scraps of burial shrouds, menstrual cloth, and other such scraps of cloth to make their robes. As you might imagine, this resulted in garments that were a mix of colors. As a solution, these garments were dyed using locally sourced saffron to create a more uniform look. End quote. So I find that interesting, that in Buddhism they took a very far step from Hinduism, in that if you touched menstruating rags that had been used and discarded, you would have been considered unclean and untouchable in a lot of India. A Brahma would never do that. Same thing goes for a burial shroud or for touching a corpse. Those were considered unclean, and you would now be an untouchable, permanently diseased and doomed to forever reincarnate as an untouchable with some terrible karma that you could never work off. So the fact that Buddhists, according to this article at the least, were taking burial shrouds and menstrual cloths that were used and discarded, I find it very interesting. They were definitely in a state, a more closer state of Agori, where everything is God, or at least maybe that was the intention, maybe it wasn't even thought of, but nothing is unclean. This is garbage, let's recycle it. I think it was more conscious of the surroundings, and also less worried about having money to go fund new clothes and look tidy. They found whatever rags they could scrap together, they dyed them so it looked uniform, and that was enough. I think that goes with their idea of detachment and poverty a lot more genuinely than what the Brahmas do, but that's just my opinion. So this closes my lecture, or my talk on chapter 12, robes. Love is the law, love and your will. Hope you enjoy this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Later on.